Takyapi, Chanwashtea Nape Chuza Pielo, Tachunku Heskai, Amacha Pielo, Malakota. My relatives, I give you a warm handshake. My name is Holy Road. I am Lakota. My non-Indian name is Kevin Abrask, and I'm the managing editor for Indians.com, a Native American news website owned and operated by Ho-Chunk Incorporated, the economic development corporation for the Winnebago tribe of Nebraska. I want to thank you all for joining us tonight. We are gathered here tonight to talk about the Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women and Girls Awareness Day, which is today, May 5th. And we've gathered a host of guests with us tonight. I'm joined by my co-hosts, Colette Yellowrobe. Say hello, Colette. If you say hello, they can see you.
No, I am. Hello, everybody. Good to see everyone. I was really waving really hard.
Great. Leo Yankton is also joining us tonight as a co-host. Leo, please just say hello. Maybe Leo isn't there anymore. I'll introduce him when he comes back. Tonight we're also joined by, and I need to, I do apologize for this. I also need to apologize for speaking before my elders. And I would like to introduce one of my elders, a Sicangu Lakota woman who I've come to know very well here in Lincoln, Nebraska, where I live. And she's become a real mentor to me. And her name is Miss Phyllis Stone. Phyllis, thank you for joining us tonight. And Phyllis will be saying the opening prayer tonight. And I'll let her take it away from there. Thank you.
Thank you, Kevin. I really appreciate this. I'm so happy that you're making this podcast to make everybody aware of this day. You know, it's a day that is sadly remembered, but then so are a lot of our other days. We commemorate them, and we will be commemorating this day for as long as we live, I'm sure. And it's so unfortunate, the reason why these people who prey on us, you know, the Indian women, the indigenous women, they actually need to be prayed for. We need to help them. We need to give them strength to educate themselves, to get them away from doing that to us. The end result for them is money, I know, but there's got to be other ways. There's just got to be. Anyway, thank you again, Kevin, for honoring me in this way. And I appreciate your words. I really do. Let's pray that someday, we won't all have to get together and tell people what's going on. I'm going to be burning sage. I hope my alarms don't go off. If I quickly move from the screen, it's because my alarms went off. Have you guys done that in your houses? Have you lit sage and gone around to the doors and to the windows where you're supposed to do the sage, and your alarms go off? Oh my goodness. So hopefully mine won't. I will keep feeding it, and hopefully the smoke will blow away from my alarms. But we need to do this every day, just so we are cleansed every day and we think good thoughts every day. The other morning I just could not get my thoughts going in the right direction. I just could not. So I went into the kitchen and got my shell and got my sage and lit it, said a prayer, and took it around the house, and really helped. And if it can help me, I always say, if it helps me, like who am I? When it helps me, it'll help everybody else. It will. And a long time ago, my mentor, like Albert Whitehead, my uncle Albert, always said that when we take the sage into our bodies, we don't just waft it over our head. We take it into our bodies. We open our mouths. We take our glasses off. We put our ears to that. All of our orifices, we let the sage smell, smoke come into us. That's what we're supposed to be doing. But if people don't know and all they do is just waft it, that's good enough. At least they're doing that. At least they're doing that. But if you know better, do better. People talk about walking your talk. Actually, you need to walk your prayer. It helps you to be more mindful in your daily business, in anything that you choose to do. Walk your prayer. Everybody says their morning prayers. If you don't, you should. Every morning when you thank Tankashala for your new day, be mindful all day long that you are thanking Tankashala for that day. As messed up as you think it might be, at least you have one. We can we can bow our heads when we pray. We can do that. I I remember praying with my grandpa a long time ago, and grandpa always said, be proud of who you are, Phyllis Rose. Be proud of who you are. Don't bow your head. Tunkashila doesn't want to see you being all nishika, all pitiful. Tunkashila wants to see you strong and powerful. So look up. Look up at him. He's everywhere. Look up at him. So I tend to do that. I tend to not be one of those people who, when people pray and I bow my head like that. No, no. I tend to look straight ahead and look up. I'm not being disrespectful. I'm remembering what my grandpa said when he was teaching me a long time ago. Kankashila, Vichoni Mayakuki, Tawopila Hedja. We are gathered this evening, Tunkashila, to bring awareness to the murdered, missing Indian women. It is yet another day to ask you for help in finding a way to resolve this insanity. We do pray for those who prey upon us, trying to victimize us again. Please help them. We pray for strength for those who are victims already. We pray for those relatives who are having to look for their loved ones. Help us help ourselves, Tunkashila. Help us to be more vigilant. Help us to not allow this to happen again. Help us to become more educated. Tunkashila, help us through this virus crisis. Help us to keep on our safe paths, to stay in our own lanes. Pilamiaya Tunkashila. Midakwiye Oyasi.
Takasi. Thank you for that, Phyllis.
Aho, matakiase. So earlier, Kevin, when you were introducing me, I was actually sharing the the podcast on my Facebook. So that's why I wasn't able to respond at the same time. But my name is Leo Yankton, and I am the co-host of Indian Times with Kevin and Leo. And today we have a large array of very intelligent, educated, and capable guests. So most likely I'll do more listening than talking because I feel like I can probably learn from this group a lot, just like all of us. So thank you for having me, and thank you all for being here.
Thanks, Leo. Thanks for that introduction. Um, I've asked uh, Renee Sansosi, an activist with the Omaha Tribe of Nebraska, to talk a little bit about why we wear red on this day and anytime that we commemorate the lost and stolen Native American women and girls. So, Renee, I hope you could talk a little bit about that.
Okay, good evening, everyone. Ewe de Wongide, Midakiapi, all my relations. I just wish to share what I do know about the color red and why we wear red. One is that red represents good health. It represents our blood. It is something that the spirits can see. And when we do have red in our ceremonies, whether that's with the flags or tobacco ties, oftentimes it does have that meaning for good health. And as I'm continuing to learn more and more, one, I know that red became the color for the MMIW movement because of, again, it's a sacred color and what it, how it brings attention to what's happening to our women. And for those that have been murdered or are missing and are in the spirit world, and if their spirits are also not at rest, it also would help in that way to bring attention to where the women's spirits are and to help guide them. For the spirits that help us can go and help all of these women. But in turn, I know that this day is very special, and I don't know the entire history behind this day, to be honest. And I know that it has to do with one of the young women that went missing, a girl, I believe. So for this day that we wear red, it's to bring attention to all the missing and murdered Indigenous women. And I'm really thankful to have our elders here to guide us. And I thank you, Phyllis, for this wonderful prayer and your thoughts and words that you shared with us. And thank you to everyone who's here. Wiblaha, Wopila. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Renee. Next, I'm going to have my co-host here, Colette Yellowrobe. Colette is a doctor, and she is an educator, and she's of Northern Cheyenne descent, and she's going to talk a little bit about the significance of May 5th. So go ahead, Colette.
Yes. Hello, everybody. I cannot say how incredible it is to see just this amazing array of powerful, respectful, phenomenal women and men. Thank you for joining us. That's awesome, Naish. Okay, just to give a little history so everyone that's tuning in and our friends and our allies understand, May 5th, 1992 was the birthday of Hannah Harris. She's my tribe. She's from Muddy Cluster District in Montana. It's in the southeastern part of Montana, Northern Cheyenne Res. She was brutally assaulted, sexually, violently assaulted, and essentially left for dead there. And they used May 5th to commemorate the day for hashtag MMIW legislation. There's another component more recently, Savannah's Act. Savannah Graywind was from Fargo, North Dakota. Again, she was a victim and unfortunately was killed in a violent, brutal, very misogynistic assault against her. And our newly appointed, the first time ever in the United States history, Deb Haaland and several others introduced congressional legislation to amend the VAWA Act in their honor. So we always want to give homage to them. And of course, they are just the more recent examples and more national. They got a lot of national and international coverage. but we all know that there's a long history to this, unfortunately for us. So thanks for letting me do that, Kevin.
Thank you, Colette. Next, I'm going to let our other guests introduce themselves. And I guess we'll just start with Renee, if you don't mind just kind of introducing yourself. I know I gave you a brief introduction, but...
Yeah, sure. Ebeblite wibala tamik. Umaha jaje wiwita te shonge khube wa u. Wahe jaje wiwita te Renee Sansasi. Umaha wa ubri. Relatives, my Umaha name is Sacred Horsewoman. My English name is Renee Sansasi, and I'm an Umaha woman. And I'm living here in Lincoln, Nebraska. I was born here and spent much of my life here. I can say that I had to really take this time, especially during this time that we're, been home, to really look at my own home life and to look at my children. Because, as most of us know, we're always busy, especially if we're mothers, we're, continuously busy. And this time I want to say that taking this time with my children, and, for most part, they are becoming adults. And I feel that, I really haven't had this kind of time with them in years. So it's really special. And I'm trying to find ways to help them to understand, their own lives and to understand their values. They identify as Lakota, they're enrolled Oglalas. And so in that way, I'm always looking at how do I, me being an Umaha woman, how do I raise Lakota children? So in that way, I do my best to provide them with that identity and spirituality, as well as language. And I'm not a fluent Umaha speaker, nor am I fluent in Lakota. So I appreciate everyone's guidance. I wanted to share that tonight because I feel that, with most of us being home with our children, we're probably all dealing with different kinds of events and activities that we've never indulged in before. We never had that chance to. So I'm really thankful, even as we're going through this difficulty, in combating who knows what this is, what kind of virus, we don't know what we're dealing with, but I'm, those prayers every day are to protect our people. So thank you so much. Again, I wanted to say that much. Thank you. Wiblaha.
Thank you, Renee. Michelle, would you like to go next?
Hinikarigi we know. Ho chunk raja ni aja habachenga mahide raja Michelle Free Lemire. Shung junkie gigarat ho chunk waje. I am from the Wolf Clan and the Winnebago tribe of Nebraska. I'm currently working for the language and culture program here in Winnebago, called Ho Chunk Renaissance. I'm working as a project development specialist and will be creating a language immersion classroom in the Winnebago Public School. And every now and then I try to do what I can to bring attention to this cause because it shouldn't be an issue. It just happens too much for too long and too little is done. So I'm hoping that I can make a difference, even if it's just a tiny one. And I'm very thankful that I was asked to be here today and glad to see all of you here.
Thank you for that, Michelle. Next, we'll have Nasia introduce herself.
Sorry, I was unprepared. Okay.
Oh.
My name is Nasia Olson Whitefeather. I'm a member of the Red Lake Reservation in Minnesota. I am a second year, going into my third year here at the university in Lincoln. I spend a lot of my time with Colette in her office speaking on indigenous problems on campus and, kind of pushing the limits on where my university kind of battles me back, and I'm always the one kind of speaking up for those who do know me. Yeah, I don't know what else to say. I'm still learning my ways and my ways of life, and where I come from. So, yeah.
Appreciate that. Thank you. Next, we'll have Alexandria introduce herself.
Hi, everybody. My name is Alexandria Flanders. I'm an enrolled citizen of the Winnebago Tribe of Nebraska. I'm a second year going into my third year at the University of Nebraska Omaha. I serve as the current president of the only Native American student group on campus, which is Intertribal Student Council.
Appreciate that. Thank you for joining us tonight. Next, I'll call on Margaret Hiddle.
Bonjour, Margaret Hiddle, Indigenous. I am Margaret Hiddle. I am Lakota Ojibwe, and I am a professor of history and Native studies at the University of Nebraska, Lincoln.
Great. Thank you for joining us. Next, I'll call on Mona Zufante.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for inviting me to participate on this Facebook Live. I am the Winnebago Public Health Administrator. I'm a member of the Seneca Cayuga Nation of Oklahoma. I've been the administrator for about, I think, 9 years. I don't know, just having a lot of fun up here in Winnebago. So, but I oversee one of the field health programs that I oversee is a domestic violence sexual assault program. And so this is something that's very near and dear to our people, and making sure that we continue to bring awareness and education and do everything that we can to try to prevent this from occurring to our people. And each member of our tribe and of all tribes is very precious and sacred, and so we want to protect them as much as we can. So thank you, and I appreciate all the good words of everyone that has spoken before me, and I apologize to my elders for speaking here today because there's a few here. And so I appreciate all of you, and I'm sure I can learn a whole bunch from all of you. I'm, like I said, only over the program, and so I just know enough to be dangerous and supportive, but I'm sure there's a lot more I can learn. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us, Mona. Next, I'll have Grace Johnson introduce herself.
Hello, everybody. Imachi Apie, Wa'ushpekianwi. My Lakota name is Altar Woman. I'm an enrolled member of the Oglala Lakota tribe. I grew up in Pine Ridge, South Dakota. I currently live in Omaha, Nebraska. I am director of the behavioral health program for the Omaha tribe in Macy. I oversee the alcohol and drug program also. And my focus in trauma work is historical trauma and working with families in trauma in general. Welcome.
Thank you for joining us, Grace. I'm going to call on the person right next to Renee there. Sorry, I'm not sure who that is. Lila?
Sarah Rowe.
Oh, Sarah. Okay. Sarah, if you'd introduce yourself.
Yeah, sorry about that. I'm using my daughter's computer. Thank you for inviting me here. I'm Sarah Rowe. I'm a visual artist in Omaha. I'm enrolled in the Ponca tribe. I'm also Lakota. I worked with several nonprofits throughout the region doing healing arts programming, including one with the missing and murdered indigenous women's group at the Ponca tribe. My passion is creating safe spaces for healing, shared reflection. I have a lot to learn as well, but I think just being vocal and open, and just inviting as many people into the conversation as possible will help spread awareness and hopefully bring an end to this. So thank you for having me.
Thank you for joining us tonight. Adrian, if you'd introduce yourself.
Hi, my name is Adrian Chalopa. I am Kiowa Apache. I'm from Oklahoma. I am the sister of Zachary Bear Hills, cousin sister, and I am honored to be here to speak before you guys. Thank you. Aho.
Thank you for joining us tonight, Adrian. Next, I'll ask Misty Frazier if you would introduce yourself.
Petu washte, chante washte na pet yuzapi. Ampo mini boja demie, na washichi ya Misty Fraser makiapie, Isanti da makota, Hobu wakbara edwati. We just want to say good day to all of you. My Dakota name is Ampo Mini Boja, which means Misty Dawn. And I am Isanti Dakota, and very happy to be here today. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us, Misty. Next, I'll have Lestina introduce herself.
Good evening, friends and relatives. My name is Lestina Beltran. I'm from the Sisseton Wahpeton Dakota Sioux tribe, but I'm also Isanti and Ihunktua Sioux on my dad's families. And I am here from Omaha, Nebraska. I currently work at Nebraska Urban Indian Health Coalition as an inpatient residential drug and alcohol counselor. And I am also the project coordinator for the Sex Trafficking Project Beacon grant that we just recently got. And my main focus and study is like on prevention, like how can we prevent the missing and murdered Indigenous women, men, and boys and girls. It's something that I have a passion for. I have a few relatives who are, lost in that cause. And so that just hits home for me. And I feel like, an ounce of, what the old saying is, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. So I just want to give my all to, bringing awareness to this topic and using my education and my experience in applying what I know to helping people. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us, Lestina. We appreciate that. Hey, Grace, I was wondering if you could silence your mic there when you're not speaking. So I think you might have some background noise there.
Oh. It wasn't mine, but I know it's somebody's.
Oh, okay. All right. So, yeah, there's a lot going on this week, as I'm sure all of you know. President Donald Trump actually just visited Phoenix, Arizona this morning, and he visited with a number of leaders of the Navajo Nation. And, he actually talked a lot about how he was the first president to issue a proclamation in honor of the National Day of Awareness for MMIW. Despite the fact that the U.S. Senate has been commemorating the day since 2017, and despite the fact that tribal villages and communities have been honoring this day for many years. I think it's also important to recognize, too, that today the Senate actually introduced a bipartisan resolution designating May 5th as a National Day of Awareness for missing and murdered Native women and girls. This was from a press release that Senator Tom Udall sent off earlier today. And he did talk about, some of the legislation that is slowly making its way through Congress. The Senate still needs to reauthorize the Violence Against Women Act package that the House of Representatives has already passed. The VAWA package includes key tribal and MMIW response provisions, according to Senator Udall. So, on this day, as it is and has been in most recent years, there's a lot going on in terms of efforts to improve the situation for missing and murdered Indigenous women. And a lot of people, like I would say the president, who seem to want to take kind of some credit for what's going on too. So I did want to just kind of, as we go along here, present a number of questions to all of you that the National Resource Center on Domestic Violence posed for people to consider today. And they posted these questions throughout the day on their Twitter account. But I thought maybe we could start with one of those questions. So the question is this: considering that violence against Native women is a spectrum, and MMIWG represents the tragic end of that spectrum, what do you consider to be the root causes of violence against Native women, including domestic violence, sexual assault, trafficking, murder, and other crimes? I'll open that up to whoever would like to talk about that.
I'll say something about that. This is Adrian Chalapa here, and I think it's our invisibility, and our dehumanization. Both issues, I think, are perpetuated by the media And until we are seen and valued as human beings in the media, unfortunately, I think it's gonna keep happening because most of America doesn't even know we exist. Most of America thinks that natives went extinct. So, you know, there's that. And then with the constant, I don't know, I call it clownery, or like, you know, the mascots, the costumes, the Pocahontas type of portrayal of Native women, I think it makes it easier for us to be dismissed and completely forgotten about. And I say that coming from a perspective as someone who studied the media, have a degree in mass communications, and have always had a problem with the way the media portrays our people.
This is Michelle Lemire. The thing that I'd like to add to that is I think it probably started way back at first contact with colonialization. You know, I don't think our people were treated like this. Our women were treated like this. And it wasn't until the European settlers came along and brought their values with them. They treated their women like second-class citizens, or not citizens at all, more like property. And if we just look way back to the Constitution and Declaration of Independence, you could tell what they thought of Indians, period, where it's written in the documents that we were merciless Indian savages. Now, if that's how they viewed the men, well, considering what their attitudes were towards women, we were even less than that. So I think those attitudes about women being unequal and less than, I think those attitudes are kind of hard to get rid of, and they still prevail today. We still have the income inequality that I guess demonstrates and illustrates that problem.
I wanted to say something from a younger perspective. It's still an educational thing. I still have to go into my classrooms and still educate my peers, as well as most of my professors, on who I am, where I come from, but also letting them understand that I am one person, not a general group in that, as well as educating my like cousins and stuff like that who didn't grow up on the reservation, who grow up in the city, and kind of where we got disconnected with our beliefs and where we came from. Just like Michelle said, like, I know for a fact that like in my tribe, our women were, you know, at the head of the table telling, you know, what was going to happen, what was going to happen, and, you know, what we were going to eat and things like that. But and I feel like a lot of it is the miseducation and the not wanting to believe what is going on, what is put forth in front of, you know, the media and stuff like that. So
I guess what I have to say about this topic is if we're looking at these things on a spectrum, like as maybe leading towards being a missing and murdered Indigenous woman or girl, I would have to say, you know, we need to go back to like how we are raising our kids and how society is shaping and forming their beliefs. And from working with a lot of different tribal groups, women, mostly women, I can say that, you know, as a young girl, a lot of stuff is normalized, like the traumas, the sexual abuse, the physical abuse, you know, seeing your parents abusing each other, the domestic violence, and all of that is something that is normalized at an early age. So it's like as we progress into women and into adults, then we think that that type of behavior is normal or that type of behavior is love. And I don't think that, you know, deep down, like we want that to be true, but it's something that we see. So then I feel like when these women get older and, you know, they can come into the abusive relationships or they can come into the sex trafficking, and as soon as somebody shows them that form of love, you know, they settle or accept that. So I think, you know, to prevent going into on that end of the spectrum, we need to start younger and like educate our young women and our girls and even our boys like on what real love is, and you know that that type of behavior is not acceptable. I mean, that's what I gather from like studying the social groups, specifically our social groups.
Okay, so I would like to speak on this as well. Um, my name is Leo Yankton, and as a young boy with long hair, I looked very feminine, and I had been sexually assaulted a couple different times in my life, and I got big. I'm 6'6" and almost 250 pounds now. And in my early adult years, I attacked several sex offenders or sex predators when I found out who they were. And what I realized later on in life as I gained wisdom was that I wasn't actually accomplishing anything. I was just perpetuating that violence and that dysfunction. And I wanted to see how I could stop this because it's systematic. And those people that I had harmed, it didn't change anything as far as our rates of being violated sexually. And one of the things that I looked at just recently was our substance abuse and our ability to combat that and to heal from that. And one of the things that I noticed is there are not a lot of sobriety aftercare programs where people who are coming out of treatment for 60 days, 90 days, and then they're going back into a community that has a really high rate of alcoholism, has the ability to have a safe space so they can really build that foundation for sobriety. And I believe that predators look for people who are vulnerable. So our community has such high rates of substance abuse. I believe that that also plays a big part. So when I think about how I could protect my own people who are vulnerable, um, it went from me thinking, okay, I can use my size and aggression, to me thinking, okay, well, maybe if I could start to help provide a safe space for people who want to become sober, that would allow that would create a defense within them because they're not as vulnerable, um, because they're not dealing with that substance abuse anymore as well. And another thing that I related with Red Dress with also with how this mainstream society sees us is a lot of people who are Christian see us as savages and heathens if we're not Christian. So what what I saw that the Red Dress Project started with a woman named Jamie Black, and one of her and indigenous relatives taught her that spirits can only see the color red. And so by creating these red dresses, these empty dresses, she was calling back the spirits of our missing and murdered indigenous women who no longer have a voice. And that red hand across the face of us who are trying to bring awareness and to combat this is a representation of those women who have been silenced by being kidnapped or killed, or are who are surviving in sex trafficking right now, and who are basically being raped on a daily basis. And for a long time, I felt hopeless. I felt like, well, there's no way I can stop this because these predators are invisible, you know. But I was thinking to myself, well, you know, I'm not some combat expert, so I can't go and try to train women to fight back. But you know, maybe I can help with trying to combat the alcoholism. And the only way I can do that would be to create a sobriety aftercare program that's on a volunteer basis, because you can't force anybody to get sober. You can't force anybody to care for themselves, you know. And we're suffering from historical trauma. We're suffering from current and past oppression and exploitation and abuse that creates a lot of hopelessness amongst our community. And so that's one of the ways I feel like I can combat it. And that's one way that I feel like it makes us vulnerable too, is the fact that we deal with a lot of substance abuse, and people who are traditional natives are looked upon as heathens who are going to go to hell. And it's a lot easier to hurt someone who's going to hell anyway. And so there's this disattachment or this dehumanization, um, like one of you were speaking on earlier. So that was my thoughts on that.
Yeah, I would echo what other people have said, that we're living in a colonial system that's designed to erase, silence, and disenfranchise Indigenous people. The report on missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls that came out last year in Canada called it genocide, and said that there's a deliberate and systematic pattern of gendered and racialized violence that is historic. It's 500 years old, but it's also maintained by the state to this day. And it's designed, it comes from the colonial project of displacing Indigenous people from their lands, from their communities, and from their identities as Indigenous people. And I think that violence against the land leads directly to violence against women. And it's not a coincidence that, from the fur trade to the gold rush to man camps and oil fields today, this is, these are sites of violence against Indigenous women.
I would agree with Margaret's statements there. I've studied historical trauma for a long time, and I focus a lot on trauma in general. And from what I've seen in Native families who working in drug and alcohol programs, we are vulnerable, and there is a lot of dysfunction in these families. There's a lot of trauma that's being passed down intergenerationally. There's a lot of a loss of culture, a loss of knowledge, a loss of parenting. This all stems from the historical trauma that tribes have been experiencing since the arrival of Columbus. We are marginalized. We are disempowered. Colonization is still live and well in our culture, in our communities, and on our reservations. And we're romanticized in the media, which does not help us at all. It doesn't make us look human. We're not seen as modern. We're seen as exotic. People don't want to know us. They just want to know somebody who's Native. And they don't see us as human. We're not valued. But I think also a loss of Native tribes had a loss of feminine power.
Mm-hmm.
There was a huge imbalance in the power structure in tribes. Many tribes were matriarchal. Many of them had women in positions of power that made decisions for the tribe. And this was deliberate. This was left out of history also. Whenever they did any studies or they talked or they wrote about tribes, they left out the history of the women and the role that they played. There's laws that were passed that disempowered women. Whenever the Land Act, what was it? When the land was given up, and the Allotment Act, placed into the males, the head of the household, where traditionally that should have been placed within the women's household. The women should have owned all that. When you own property and you own any kind of property, really, that elevates your level of power and your status. And tribes traditionally, women owned pretty much everything. Yes. It's complex. It's multi-layered. It's been going on for 500 years. The sad thing is people don't know we're still here. They don't understand that we're alive, that we're a functioning society today. The other sad part, like I said, was the loss of culture. In that culture, we had a system for parenting. We had a way for dealing with misdeeds, I guess you say. When somebody broke a law, we knew how to not punish, but we knew how to make that right again within the tribe. We knew how to make peace within our tribe and our people. And we knew how to add consequences to inappropriate behavior. There was a traditional knowledge system there. We had a whole system that worked really well. The government, it didn't work for the government though, because if we were empowered and we were organized, American government couldn't get our lands. They couldn't get the upper hand in treaty negotiations. So there was a deliberate takedown of our entire system of our tribes, from top to bottom, from the parenting, from the family, from the governing styles, and our traditional belief system. It was outlawed. Our knowledge and our parenting skills, everything we knew how to run our society was intertwined with our belief systems and our spirituality. And once that was outlawed, we didn't have that layer of leadership that would have been there, that we could have had, those safety nets that we should have had as a culture to step in when there was a problem in families. On top of that, there was boarding schools, and that went on for decades and generations, which was devastating to so many families. I think that's where a lot of our domestic violence was introduced, was in the boarding schools.
I'd like to say something also about violence. I can say that for myself, growing up, not only here in Lincoln, but, going home to the reservation and being amongst my relatives, I witnessed and experienced a lot of violence. And a lot of domestic violence that I witnessed was within my own relatives, my aunts, my uncles, cousins. And when you witness such things as a child, you become, I want to say you do become desensitized to that kind of situation. And if you're involved with it within your own home, whether it's with your own family or with your partner, then, you don't, if you're not aware of what you're dealing with, whether it's verbal, physical, emotional, mental, all those, all these different levels of violence that occur, if you're not aware that this is something that should not be happening, then, how do you combat that as a child or as a woman or as, a man? Unless you start to go through this kind of understanding or training, whatever you want to call it, healing would be the best word, I think. But once you start to engage in healing, then you realize, oh, wait, that should not have happened to me or to someone else that I knew. That should not have been said to me that way, because it definitely left its impression upon me that has also shaped the way I seen the world. So for instance, as what you had related, Grace, about boarding schools, I seen my own mother, go through this kind of experience of, what she had endured in boarding school, but also what she had endured within her family. And for me, growing up and understanding the level of violence that my mother had endured, it made me understand as I became an adult, like, okay, this isn't something that should be normalized amongst our people, especially for our children. If we are being taught to be this way because our people have lost their traditional means of supporting their families, but also in helping our people to stay aware of what's, what is at the heart of, this, this whole, everything that's happening to us right now. If we are not aware of that ourselves, that is something that we're going to have to change. And, I know that a number of us have taken that upon ourselves to do that. And by changing that outlook, you're then taking a hold of the future for your children and for your families and saying, this is going to stop now. And then you're able to address those issues of vulnerability. And like Leo said, substance abuse being one of the main things that we're combating within our communities. That, involves violence, involves sexual abuse, involves all of these abuses that are happening. So now, now that we're aware ourselves, now we're finding ways to speak out. And for me, as I speak about it personally, it's like finding my own voice. It took me years. It wasn't until I was like 45 that I started finding my own voice and realizing, wow, people really did, make it difficult for me to speak up about, what was happening. And then I began to go through my own treatment, through, the meetings that I went through the ceremonies I went through. But also in that process of finding my voice, I realized I need to create boundaries. And to create healthy boundaries means that I have to be aware of what happened to me. And this is something that all our people need to have an understanding of. What are the healthy boundaries that our people once had in place when we were intact, healthy tribes? This is something that, when we go through that training for historical trauma, this is what we begin to investigate ourselves. So setting healthy boundaries now, what it creates though, it can create a lot of division within our own relatives, our own families, because sometimes they don't like that if, they're still engaging in unhealthy behaviors. However, we still have to do that. And we still have to be able to function in a healthy manner for our own well-being. So how, on a spectrum, I look at it, only way I can look at it is in that circular way, and looking at it in a way that as we go through those circles, we're coming back, every time to a place. However, that place that we're at, it's like we've learned some more. And we continue the next, the next season, the next year, we're learning more. This is what I feel that we need to bring back to our people, is that understanding that they can also find that way of healing, but also then to create those strengths. And I feel that with everything that's happening with the kind of predatory conditions that we're existing in and the vulnerabilities, this is what our people need to take that next step. And as we're thinking about it, we're all thinking about what are those next steps? How do we do this? And for me, being a researcher and also in helping develop curriculum, that's something I'm thinking about constantly. How do we empower our own young people, our women, our children, and what are those next steps we need to take in order to help them to understand, what's happening to them, but also to, what are we going to do here for the future?
Thank you for sharing that, Renee. One of the things I was hoping we could do tonight is say the names of people who either we've lost or who we know who have been either murdered or abducted, and certainly respect everybody's right to privacy, or if you're not comfortable with that, please don't feel like you have to. But I did want to offer that opportunity to my guests tonight. I know a number of you have lost people, and in fact, I guess probably almost all of us have probably lost somebody along the way throughout all of this. One name I guess I would like to share tonight is an aunt of mine who died back in about 1980. Her name was Olivia Jumping Bull, and she was a young woman at the time. And I remember Olivia, she would always get in, her boyfriend would always beat her up, and he was a very violent man. And I have a really strong memory of myself of one time when he was trying to break into her bedroom with an axe, actually. And we were able to actually get her out of that room and get away from him that night. But a few months later, he actually stabbed her to death. And so I just wanted to share that. You know, I think about Olivia a lot, and she was a very bright and very happy and very humorous person. And I recall her; she was very loving to her family, and it really, really shattered her whole family. You know, her father and her sisters. Everybody was really shattered by that, and in many ways are still shattered by that. So I know it affects so many people when this kind of thing happens, and it's really sad too. Obviously, that oftentimes it's partners or boyfriends or husbands that do this. So I thought that was important to share as well for that reason. But you know, feel free to say people's names as we go along tonight, and you know. I thought I'd just throw that out there, but
I'd like to say my niece Ashley Aldridge, for my sister Tilly, and she was missing in January and then was murdered. And on our reservation there in Macy, and her partner was found not guilty actually on Friday. So it's been very traumatic for her mother and her parents, her family. I'm still dealing with that. So I just wanted to say that.
I appreciate you sharing that, Renee.
Oh, I just had a couple of names. Penny, she's the daughter of Lord Matrios, a good friend of mine up in Minnesota. And that was last year. And the last that I knew that they were really trying to get law enforcement to do something on that case, and they weren't getting very far. County and state and tribal. And the other one I wanted to also mention was my tuina, Mahpia Toli, Dawn Starland. She, that was in 2010, was shot and killed on our reservation here in Quanti. Thank you.
Thank you.
I would want to also speak a little bit on my cousin Lakota Renville from the Sistan-Waptin Sioux tribe. She was reported missing in 2005, and her body was found in October of 2005. She was brutally murdered also, and her case is a cold case. But we do a lot of postings in her remembrance on Facebook. And my relatives in Sistan do a lot of MMIW activities on behalf of her. And the detectives, they all chalk it up to, no evidence, or, it's a cold case. And unfortunately, I think that happens all too often with our Native American brothers and sisters. They just don't want to put in the effort, the time, or the money into investigating these cases.
Absolutely. I wanted to pose another question if I could. And if, feel free as we go along to say people's names that you feel you would like to do. What do you consider some of the top challenges related to MMIWG, the crisis, and what can be done to address these challenges?
Kevin, this is Missy again, and I had a few thoughts on that. I think some of the ladies have already commented on quite a few of the issues, including historical trauma and invisibility. And I think that our population as a whole is really forgotten about in a lot of ways. I mean, we've talked about a little bit about data and statistics, and in data and statistics in every area lacks data on the Native population. And we've touched a little bit on lack of responders. There's lack of training, lack of understanding, with first responders. And I don't want to, attack any one field, because there are good officers out there and good first responders, but in many areas we see that they don't respond or they don't adequately investigate on these cases, and they just get shoved under the rug and get charged with something else. And so sometimes we have jurisdictional issues. And then on the second part of that question on what can we do to address these challenges, I want to also echo, I think, what Renee had said about empowering our children. And some of the ladies have also touched on some of this too. And, and just on those points too, with being vocal and data, there's just that lack of data. And so unless we can paint a picture of how big this issue really is and to know how many there are out there, it's kind of hard to paint that picture. But I think also healing and resources and a lot of our healing can come from our culture and our language and traditions and things that we know it as, and some would say as a protective factor for us as Native people. We have a beautiful culture, and I've seen amazing things happen, and through that power of prayer that, if we can bring that back and again, I want to express that again of empowering our young women and children and it doesn't have to, and I guess I shouldn't say just our young women, but our young men as well to know and to do something about it. Thank you.
Thank you.
I wanted to comment on the young men and stuff. What I've noticed in my family, in my household, it takes a lot for my dad to talk about where he came from, his feelings and his understanding of what his environment was growing up and things like that. And I feel like if there was a way to make it known that it's okay to have that environment of feelings and love and stuff like that. I know that was commented on earlier. I feel like that is such a huge step that we have kind of yet to take as a community. There's still that boundary of, oh, if I talk about my feelings, I'm not strong anymore. If I talk about what I'm thinking, I'm not, obeying what people think of me. Growing up, I was told a child should be seen and not heard. Me personally, I've broke that rule many of times. For those who know me personally, I love to talk and I love to push the envelope. And I feel like that's something that we should, make normalized, like be okay to ask those hard questions, because those hard questions always seem to be, avoided until it's too late to be able to get those hard questions answered. My couple of years in college, I've learned that, it's going to be hard and it's going to make me feel anxious in the moment. But once I get my questions answered, then I can move on with my life. Again, I feel like just, really making sure that us as a younger generation, being able to have that environment with our parents and stuff like that, that can be passed on to like our younger siblings. If they see that, my older sister can talk to my mom about her feelings, then I can go to her, instead of them seeing how, the toxic relationships are and they feel like they need to go elsewhere to get those answers or get those conversations. That is such a big thing, I feel like. So
Great. Appreciate that. We did want to introduce somebody who I think you can all see was popping in there a little bit. Eileen Janice is my aunt, and she's from the Pine Ridge Reservation. Thank you for joining us tonight, Eileen. Can you hear us? Maybe not.
Yes, I can, Kevin.
Okay.
Thank you for inviting me. And I'm sorry I got busy, so I came in late.
No problem at all. Eileen, I wondered if you could talk about kind of what you're seeing there on the reservation in Pine Ridge, and especially as it relates to the pandemic. What sort of effects are you seeing this pandemic have on your community?
We're seeing an increase in domestic violence. We're seeing an increase in a lot of violence, from beatings to kids running away, and wanting to commit suicide. And we're seeing a lot of bootleg alcohol coming in and hurting us big time. We're getting all these, the families are broken. We had to fight for a family today to keep their house because so many of them stay in it that a couple of them ruin it for them by drinking. So we had to help them to try to get to stay in their house until they can have a hearing. Otherwise, they would have been out on the streets with this COVID-19 and or whatever, nowhere to go with little babies. But it's tough. It's tough here, and it's always been though. It's not just the COVID-19. It's always been really bad, but now it's getting worse with the violence.
Would you say that the self-isolation, kind of quarantine measures that are in effect there, as I understand, Pine Ridge actually is on like a 2-week shelter-in-place order that started this past Saturday. Would you say that those measures have had some impact on these issues?
Yes, we had a quarantine for 2 weeks, and everybody had to stay in, and you have to go to the store and pay whatever prices they put out there, and some of them are really outrageous. We have a grocery store in White Clay, Nebraska that was 2 miles away, and the first quarantine, they didn't let people go over there. They stopped them at the Nebraska line because it's only 2 miles away. And then now we're in this, they call it a lockdown, but we can come out of our homes, but we're supposed to, we have a curfew, but you cannot leave the reservation. So if somebody went during their EBT SNAP time to get food to last them, they'd go to Shadron or Rapid to go, but there's nothing there. And our store does have everything, but it's really expensive. So then with people having to stay home in their houses because the cops are out all over checking them and all that, they tend to get tired of each other. And then I have our court system. Our attorney general is not keeping anybody in jail. So I have grandmas that are scared of their grandkids that are either have they needed that involuntary commitment, but they also have to live with them because they can't just kick them out during this time. But the kids are mean to them. The grandkids are mean. They're on meth, they're drinking, and they get mean, and the grandma calls the cops. And if the cops get there because they're so busy with other calls, they only keep them maybe 8 hours. And so when the kid gets out, they're madder. They're even madder and more angry. So in that household situation, it's really bad. And there's other kids there too, other grandkids, like the young girls, maybe aunts and uncles. There's a couple generations that may be staying there. So they take off and then nobody knows where they are. So that's when you start missing our young women and our people. And yesterday there was one that was found out by the nursing home that was beaten so bad, or the guess he was knocked out cold. He's okay, he's alive. And another one was gained in one of our housing areas. And I don't know how he's doing. I don't think he's doing too good because his head was swelling and everything else. But it's just mean, very mean things going on because of being isolated like we are. Yeah, and our children are hungry.
I want to thank you for sharing that, Eileen. Eileen works with the youth in Pine Ridge along with Yvonne Tiny DeCory. They run a program called the Bear Program that's, primarily serves the Pine Ridge community and a good chunk of the reservation as well. So I want to thank you for sharing that.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you for having me.
I have a number of other questions. And if you don't, certainly I missed something, or you want to go back and talk about some other question I've asked previous to this that you didn't get a chance to answer, please feel free to do so. But I wanted to move on to another question here. Recognizing that the MMIWG crisis is tied to the failure of the federal government to fulfill its trust responsibility, what actions can be taken to end this violence against Native women and girls?
We need to take a step back. I know everybody always says keep moving forward, but we need to take a step back to get some of our values back, to get some of how our people used to practice the way of living, you know, being calm and talking and being welcoming to your youth. And now nobody knows how to do that anymore because they took that away from us. But it's so, and a lot of orphans. I mean, they may have parents, but they're still orphans because nothing was passed down to them. So like I said, with my mom, when I had my sons, it was always, don't get mad, don't get disgusted. He didn't ask to be born, he's yours, and you got to take care of him now, and you need to be calm when you do it. So being calm, being sober, being drug and alcohol free, and putting the kids' priorities first really helps. But nowadays with our youth, all they see is fighting, arguing. They used to make us, when adults talk, they used to make us go outside. We couldn't listen. We didn't know what was going on. So if they were mad at somebody, we didn't know. So we still greeted everybody with hello, hi, how are you? But nowadays, parents don't do that anymore. They let the children sit there and listen to their adult conversations, and these children carry it out into the world. So if the mother says, I'm mad at this one because this happened and that, when the kid goes outside, he's carrying a rock in his backpack that says, I'm mad at that person too. And I'm going to do this. This one treated this one bad. I'm going to be like that. My mom and dad, whatever, my sisters. And they carry these hardships with them, and they shouldn't have to. When parents, adults talk, they should make the children leave the room. And a lot of our teachings are gone like that. They're simple things, but when they're broken, it takes a big toll on our youth, because we see that. Nobody grieves properly anymore. And here we have over 300 deaths a year. And so you feel bad because this one died, but you never really get to mourn because 2-3 more are dying after that. And it's such a small community. It's spread out in land-wise, but everybody knows everybody. So it's really hard to grieve properly. And that affects the things too. And when all the churches came in, they taught a different way. And our Lakota way was the best way to grieve over loss and even relationships and things like that when you lose them, But now a lot of those values are gone, and we're trying to teach them. There's a lot of Lakota language classes that are being taught. But the lessons that go along with them are few and far between. So it's, in some ways we're really improving, but in other ways we still lack the right way to live.
Sure. Thank you. Sure. Mona, I was wondering if you would talk a little bit about what kind of impact you're seeing in the Winnebago community related to this pandemic and how it's affecting children and domestic partners and married couples or whoever else.
Could you say that again? How what affects them?
Oh no, sorry. This is a question for Mona Zafante.
Oh, okay.
She's on a roll. So similar to what she has been describing, the Winnebago tribe has enacted a curfew that starts at 7 p.m. to 5 a.m. But unlike the Pine Ridge Reservation, they are able to continue to work off the reservation, and a lot of our people go to Sioux City. Those are the nearest grocery stores really to us as well. We've also implemented a mandatory mask law or resolution that went into effect last week. So everybody's wearing masks, but we've been pretty fortunate here that we haven't seen an increase in domestic violence or assaults. Although I believe that the drinking has increased slightly, although I can't prove any of that. But I do see the neighboring town has a lot of cars that I believe belong to us. But I know that they've been really trying to enforce the curfew as best as they can. And of course, law enforcement is only, there's only so many people that are able to do that. But we do have weekly calls with the various partners, such as Human Services. We do have a Youth Crisis Intervention Center located on the Winnebago Reservation. And so we do stay in contact with all of them each week to see how it's going. We have really, because Dakota County is very a hot spot at this time for COVID positives. So we've been really trying to limit our contact, doing a lot of behavioral health tele-services. And we've actually seen an increase in those people taking advantage of those services. And I don't know if it's because, and we'll probably do a focus group after this is all done and we can recoup. But we've seen an actual increase in using our behavioral health services. So I don't know if it's because they don't have to come into the building and they can just call or do a video chat. So that's kind of, a positive that people are reaching out and taking advantage of the services that we do have. Human Services has also described here that we've had also a decrease of investigations. So we've really tried to give the kids more information. And I know that's a difficult time now that we have them all in our houses or just right outside our door. But we've really been trying to engage them as much as we can and providing different activities that the parents can do with their children and using a lot of the social media that's available to us. And so we do also have a live event that occurs every Thursday for the Winnebago tribe, and they're available to do ask different questions and whatnot. And so we really try to keep our community updated with everything that's going on. And back to one of the questions that you had raised, talking about the sexual assault and investigations. I know we have an issue with that here in Winnebago, that we have to use the neighboring hospitals, and we had some issues with getting those investigations completed in our Sioux City area. And so some of our survivors have to go further away, and so that just complicates it for them because they are being sent to Omaha or Lincoln, which is, an hour and a half or 2 hours away. And so that further victimizes them with that long transport. And so, but also going back to the data is very lacking. And then the continuity of investigations and care. And so those are always things that we need to be mindful of and try to work on.
Great. Thank you for sharing that, Mona. I'm going to go to one of our viewers on Facebook there, asked the question, as a non-native, what can we do to help? I'm going to share a little how to help box here that I have, and I'll read it. Starts off with how you can help. Follow these organizations online and on Twitter. First one is the Alaska Native Women's Resource Center. You can see the Twitter handle on the left there. The National Indigenous Women's Resource Center is also a great resource. The National Resource Center on Domestic Violence is a great organization. Also, consider telling your congressional representative to increase resources for tribal victim services, address the inadequate responses of criminal justice systems, and restore inherent tribal authority to hold perpetrators accountable. So are just a few of the things that that anybody can do, native and non-native, to try to further the cause of reducing MMIW here in our country.
Kevin?
Yes.
I wanted to take a quick moment to, we had Dr. Cynthia Willis-Escada join us too.
Oh,
She
yes.
kind of ducked in there, and she's not going to get away with that from me. So she's a native psychologist, and I know she researched before in DV and other issues. So I just wanted to make sure we acknowledged her and be respectful. She was my first native teacher ever in my life in grad school. So that's a big deal. Thanks for joining us.
How could you do this to me? I have myself blocked because I look so awful. I've been working outside and I was trying to hide.
Well, you have such a nice voice. Thank you.
No, thank you so very much. And many of you I've known for a very long time, and it was really great to join this group and hear what everyone has said. I really appreciate all your comments so much. You know, I started doing research in this area over 20 years ago, and it was really depressing. I mean, it was really depressing. The numbers haven't changed. The risk for Indian women has not changed. And I got really frustrated and really depressed about it. And I wanted to share with you a couple of the articles or the research projects I did and the findings from that. But this was a while ago even. I was on the board at the Indian Center. I did 2 tours of duty, by the way. And so we ran a study that looked at, people kept talking about, you know, interpersonal violence and Indian women. And I kept thinking about the rhetoric that they would talk about just for domestic violence in general and what my personal knowledge from my family was like. And I thought, you know, I don't think my Indian family or my, you know, the women that I know, my relatives and friends have the same kind of idea that white women have. So I did this study where I asked a number of women from a number of different tribes at the Indian Center and then out in the community as well. Just tell me, what is domestic violence to you? When would you call the police? What kinds of behaviors would define that for you? And I got these really different responses back then, and I think we would still find it today. And I've forgotten who said it here, but one of you said, and it was just brilliant, talk about the fact that, you know, we've grown so accustomed to having violence in our communities that sometimes we don't recognize it. So one of the things I found was that for white women, if you just talk with them in a raised voice, for them, that's domestic violence, and they're going to call the police on you, right? But Indian women actually had to be physical. And then they were still reluctant to call the police. Why? Well, because the police traditionally have not been our friend, right? They've not been responsive to the needs of Indian women. And so they had a very different notion about what interpersonal violence was and also causes of it. So white women think that, you know, it's some kind of criminal behavior, that it's internal to the man or to the woman, whoever it is. But the people that I interviewed said, no, you know, that's not really the case. It goes to, and all of you have mentioned this, which is so brilliant and why I love this so much, the discussion here so much. You know, it goes to historical trauma. It goes to the environment that people have to live in. It goes to the necessity of trying to find survival in a world that doesn't like you very well. It goes to the stress that people have to manage on a daily basis. It goes to the fact that we live in a world where you can ask for help, but there's no guarantee you're going to get any help now or into the future. So all those things, you know, point to the fact that we're talking about 2 different kinds of conceptions, and the system has been built not for Indian people in response to this. Not the education programs have been built for Indian people. They've been built for basically white middle class society. That's what these programs are made for. And the education programs and the way that people talk about it is not the way we experience it. And I think that's really important to know. Another thing I would say to you, and I don't remember who said this either, but the issue of alcohol and the presence of alcohol and substance abuse, which changes the way that you view situations, interpersonal situations, and it lowers inhibitions. And this isn't true just for Indian people in the United States. Canada has the same problem, right? So there's something about the way that Indigenous people are being treated in North America that is causing us to have these dysfunctional reactions between ourselves, right? Between ourselves. And not just between men and women or women and men, but with our children too. I mean, it's becoming almost pervasive for us, but not just here in Canada too. That says to me that there's something about the way that indigenous people have been treated that's causing these dysfunctional behaviors. So I looked to see if they would treat. I gave people these kind of scenarios where I varied if it was the man or if it was the woman that was getting hit on, and whether they were white or whether they were Indian, and if they'd been drinking or not. And what I found is that, and I knew I'd find this because I'd found this for African Americans as well in another sample. They blame Indian women who have been drinking for this for interpersonal violence, right? So they're not perceiving these. So people on the outside, I guess, not internally to us, but people from the outside perceive Indian people who drink as responsible for their own violence, and they're responsible for their own outcomes, and not the fact that substance abuse or the alcohol may be a symptom of something that's larger than that. That it may be something that is related to stress and other kinds of dysfunctional behaviors that they experience. So I really appreciate this group, and I'm so glad that you guys are meeting and talking about these issues. And I'll be quiet now. I'll go back to being quiet.
Cynthia, I'm so glad you brought that up because it's something that I've seen over and I've studied over and over, and it has to do with what's called the trauma response. Excuse me. People who've experienced trauma, intergenerational trauma, multiple layers of developmental trauma, there's a certain response that people go into. It's almost a reactionary behavior, and other people outside of it see it as something that's they don't understand what's going on. And the person who's been triggered doesn't necessarily respond in a way that's rational. And so there's a whole trauma response that's happening here that outside people are not really aware of unless you have training in it, or you're in the therapeutic field or the counseling field to really understand where these people are responding, and how you respond to somebody who's in a trauma response really can determine how they respond back. Do you escalate them or do you de-escalate? If you don't have the training in that either, if you're not aware of what they're responding, many times it can get worse. It can get more exaggerated. People can respond in a much more exaggerated defensive way, in an angry manner, or not do that. They freeze. There's several trauma responses. There's fight, flight, freeze responses, and submiss. And those are things that many people are not aware of, that whenever anybody's experienced trauma, these are some of the responses they have when they don't have control over them. So there's so much more going on, so many more layers of experience that is happening that most people not be aware of. If you grew up in a Native community, you may have seen these. And like you said, the interviews you did for white ladies, for white women, their responses were so not what you would call trauma responses. They had a different way of even viewing these experiences. But Native historical trauma is real for us. It's something that all tribes have experienced. It doesn't matter what tribe you're from or what part of the country you're from. And when you understand the trauma responses and historical trauma, it gives you a bigger picture. We have better ways of dealing with our issues. We respond better, I guess.
Great. I wanted to just mention something that before we started our show tonight, I actually told Colette that I could just offer her this platform to have the show tonight, and Leo and I would just kind of stay back in the background, I guess, and maybe jump in if we wanted to or felt the need to or whatever. Colette was actually a little bit indignant about that. She said men need to get more involved in this issue, and it made a lot of sense to me, and you know, so I'm glad I joined tonight. But I did want to just kind of bring up the fact that obviously men are sometimes the victims of violence and certainly other kinds of acts like that. One of our guests tonight, Adrian Chalapa, is the sister cousin to a man named Zachary Bearheels, who was killed back in June of 2017 after an encounter with Omaha police. It's an issue that I followed ever since his death back in June of 2017, and I and a good friend of mine named Frank Lemire attended the court hearing for one of the officers who was charged with assault in that case. Officer named Scotty Payne, who was found not guilty back in November of 2018 of assault of Zachary Bearheels. Adrian, I was wondering if you'd be willing to talk a little bit about Zachary and kind of how this whole thing has affected you and your family.
Sure, thank you. So Zach is my little brother. He's a couple years younger than me, and we grew up very close, just like siblings. And Indian way, all of the cousins really don't exist. We don't do first cousin, second cousin, third cousin, whatever, like non-natives. But in our tribe, especially Kiowas and Apaches, we're like very serious about it, about our siblings, and me, I was the only girl, so I had a lot of brothers and very few sisters. And you tend to get close with those that are kind of around your age. And plus Zach and I went to high school together. We went to Riverside Indian School in Anadarko, Oklahoma, and just really grew up together. And he when he was in his late teen years, he developed schizophrenia, and that's not something that I know anything about medically, but I knew that it hindered his quality of life, and that he was a special needs person. He needed medication, and he needed doctors, at times. And but it definitely didn't change our relationship. He was still as goofy as ever and funny, and I think that's why him and I really were close, is because I have a good sense of humor, and anybody that can tell me a good story, I'm there, I'm listening. And Zach was an amazing storyteller. He could captivate you for hours and hours and hours. You could sit there and listen to his stories and partake and joke around. And we grew up very poor. We didn't have the latest games, the latest toys, the latest, we didn't have a big entertainment system or movies or anything. So as kids, sitting around and telling scary stories and things like that was all we had. And then, 2017 happened. He was on his way from South Dakota to Oklahoma, going between his two families, his dad's side and his mom's side, and was apparently kicked off the bus in Omaha, in downtown Omaha. And as a family, we didn't know that he got kicked off the bus, and until unfortunately, until it was too late. His mom was the one who knew and contacted the police to report him as someone who was a special needs person and needed to be located. And instead of the police
helping him get back on the bus or helping find relatives or just helping him, period, they killed him. There were 4 officers, and I can't, there's a video. You guys are, if you're strong enough, I encourage you to watch it. If you're dealing with some trauma and violence, is especially police violence, is a fresh trigger for you, please don't watch it, because it will haunt you. It will stay with you. And what they did to him was just absolutely inhumane. They tased him 12 times. They basically ganged up on him. There were four of them, and they just straight up murdered him. And as a family member, you know, we don't get a sorry or a oops or nothing. Just, we were told that it's time to move forward. That's what we were told. It's time to move on. And it's not right, because, you know, that's my brother. How am I going to move on? How that's not just an accident on the job. So but Zach was very loved, and he's very special to me, and I'll probably spend my whole life telling his story so that people know that he was an incredibly smart and talented and fun, warm, loving person who didn't deserve to be killed by 4 police officers. And I, you know, when I think about the MMIW, I think about the injustices and the voicelessness and the invisibility, and it makes me angry. And I know that there are men in there who suffer violence, but in a different way sometimes. And I also want to mention real quick a couple of names for MMIW. Dion Thomas from Gallup is a good friend. A good friend of mine. It was her sister. Still no justice on her case. And then Brittany Tiger out of Ada, Oklahoma. Also, no one has, you know, served time for her case. And so we see that we're battling not just the public, but also the legal system. And I thank you guys for having the discussion, because for a long time, this was hard for me to talk about, and hard for many of my family members to talk about. The anger, the pain is too much at times. Thank you.
So I would like to say something about that, because what I realize, you know, I agree with Adrian that the justice system and the law enforcement do not support natives in a way that would help to combat or to discourage targeting Native women for kidnap, rape, and murder. And some of the statistics are completely unbalanced, and you can tell that there is a lack of compassion towards our community. In 2016, there was 5,712. This is only the known cases of missing and murdered Indigenous women. And out of those cases, the Department of Justice only logged 116 of those cases. Out of 5,712, they only logged 116. So they're not even paying attention. They don't really care to even track what's happening. On the reservation, the sex crimes towards women are committed by 90% non-native. Okay, so that means that there are people out there who are non-natives who have been going onto the reservations, committing sex crimes against our vulnerable, and then leaving the reservation without any repercussions. The federal government doesn't want to get involved. The U.S. attorneys doesn't want to get involved. From 2005 to 2009, the U.S. attorney declined to prosecute 67% of the sexual abuse cases that involve Native women in America. And so you can tell by these numbers that there is a a disinterest, or there's no commitment in order to hold these people accountable or to keep us safe as a people. And so that's why we as a group have to step forward and do this. That's why the Red Dress Project with the artist Jamie Black was so important, because she was a grassroots activists who wanted to speak up about missing and murdered indigenous women. And so that was very effective. And when non-natives ask, well, how can I help? Well, lobbying your political representatives, your political leaders, and also just even giving light to the fact that this is happening. I mean, the native women are up to 10 times higher rate than the national average for being either raped, kidnapped, or murdered. And nobody's talking about it. Nobody even knows about it. So another thing you can do, and this might sound dramatic, but another thing you can do, non-native and native alike, buy that red dress. Buy that red dress and hang it outside of your house and put a sign under it that says missing and murdered indigenous women, just to get people asking the question of what is this about? Because a lot of people don't even know. So if you want to know what you can do, non-natives and natives alike, there's a lot you can do, but you got to bring light to the discussion in the first place. Here in Nebraska, Senator Tom Brewer, he put a interim study to the Senate, to the state Senate, just so that we can start tracking how many women. We're in the top 10 in Nebraska on missing and murdered indigenous women. We're in the top 10 in Nebraska, but yet we weren't even tracking these incidences, these kidnaps, these rapes, these murders. We weren't even tracking them. So how are you even going to be able to pass any laws or create any safeguards for our people if they're not even paying attention to how it happened? They talk about COVID and well, they're not even testing it, so it's not a big problem. Well, that's the same with missing and murdered indigenous women. If they're not tracking it, then it's not really a problem for the system, right? But yet we know, we feel it every day. And so as a non-native or native alike, we have to shine light on what's happening. And that's what we're doing right now with this podcast. But we need to go a step further. Let's go ahead and buy that red dress, or let's make that sign that says missing and murdered indigenous women, or take a picture with the red hand across your mouth. We got to elevate the discussion.
I want to kind of jump on what Leo was talking about and go back to what Kevin had said. I would say I wasn't quite indignant, Kevin, but I did insist that our male relatives or those who consider themselves, maybe not cisgender or other, we have to address other missing persons in this cause instead of just women and girls. Of course, I'm very pro women and girls, but we also have many other relatives who are missing and are indeed targeted. For example, Two Spirit or other. I had a cousin, unfortunately, who was brutalized back in the day. That was well before some of our more advances going on now. And another thing that I thought about when I was sitting here listening to everybody, first of all, I just have to thank you again. It's such a rich and beautiful discussion. And thank you, Leo, for inspiring me to go get a snack from my kitchen. That was great. I really love that. Geez, big old Sunday he had. We were sub texting and tweeting about him, by the way, everybody. That was great. But I thought about, our Canadian relatives who started the MMIW movement. They are indeed our founders, or our original call to action. They got us going as little warriors. And I thought about the artists up there. And a lot of them are coming to my mind. The Red Dress Project, a lot of that is for them. They elevated it that way. Craig Monkman, I'm just thinking of all these names coming through. And even the latest, the land embattlement going on, the artists were at the front lines of those. And oftentimes it is our artists.
Sorry, real quick. I'm going to show some graphics that you shared with me while you were talking about this, because it's a good time. Go ahead.
Okay, yeah, no, thank you. And so I would just start thinking back to that it's going to take a multi-pronged, so we're not just putting public health, education, which I'm an educator, feel free to. We do damage, trust me. Or you know, nursing, health, therapy. The arts have had a significant impact upon this movement. And so I would really feel bad if I didn't bring that up because I'm inspired by what they do. And I do mean art, and that's about elevating things as well. So thanks for letting me throw that in there, Kevin.
Absolutely. Actually, one of the photos that I included in this sort of montage of graphics is a picture of you in the KZUM studio with some friends. Do you remember what the discussion was about?
Oh, yes, thank you. Yeah, exactly. Public broadcasting. That was a show that my dear friends and sisters Lucinda, Gretchen, Felicia, and I can't remember if anyone else was there, but we did a broadcast after the Women's March in Lincoln a couple years ago. And again, our community came together. It was such a reverent feeling in Lincoln. They came and represented, and we advocated on behalf of MMIW to address our invisibility. Our friends in Illuminative, I know you've done a couple of interviews with them, Kevin and Leo, and probably someone else I'm not thinking of, but they have really brought to the forefront. It is the invisibility of us as Native Americans, Indigenous people, that is the number one sort of brutal machete that's just stopping us at all costs and all lengths. And one more point back to what Leo said. I have found that even our local police department in Lincoln, Ellie, who's working with the Nebraska Indian Commission, they're very open. Senator Brewer and others across the nation, they're very open. If you know of someone who's missing or murdered, they have followed up with me within 24 hours. Renee shared a really ugly, gross, obscene Facebook ad, blog guy. I called up to Turtle Mountain, Chippewa, and reported him to their people. It takes us doing simple action like that because the predators are amongst us and they won't stop in light of not just the pandemic but the man camps that are coming down. So report them. They don't deserve it. The Cheyenne people, we were very strong. And I was actually raised that way. I appreciate Kevin's aunt talking about I had to leave the house. I didn't get to hear the gossip. So I didn't get to snap eyes at who my mom didn't like. I didn't know who she didn't like. We're very traditional and strict that way. And the Cheyennes would just ostracize, especially someone who was a sexual abuser. You're done. That was it. So I agree with going back to some of those traditional ways, but we have to make it count. Don't let them back in your house around your kids. They have to, it's like the party. When it's over, I don't care where you go, but go somewhere. Go get help. That's my cat, everybody. That's what I deal with. My students are presenting and he'll
very good,
do
Colette. I just want to say something about being strong, Kevin. I grew up with violence in my home, with my father on my mother. Oh my goodness, that was awful. When I had to be with them, you know, it was awful. And I just made up my mind that that was not going to happen to me. It was not going to happen to me. I don't care with who, it was not going to happen. And I realized that the main thing that made it happen was drinking. Drinking. And so I decided way a long time ago, I was not going to drink because I was not going to allow anything to be in control of me. Not any time was I going to say, oh, I wonder what I did. Oh, did you see me do this last night? No, I was not going to allow that. And Indian women were gorgeous. You know, we're gorgeous. We stand out. No matter where we are, we stand out. And if we are drinking, we will stand out even more so. And that's when the predators spy us. That's when they say, I've got one. I've just got to hone in on her. All we have to do is be strong. Just be strong. Like I was with my smoking. I smoked terrible. Oh my goodness, I smoked like 2.5, 3 packs a day. I was terrible. But when I realized the harm I could do to my oldest son, I stopped. I absolutely stopped. I went around my apartment. I picked up all my cigarettes, all my ashtrays, and I tossed them. I stopped. And unfortunately, one of my sisters got killed at home on the reservation. I left Denver. I went home for several weeks. When I came back to Denver, I realized I was smoking again. I had to stop again. But by then I realized I'm strong. I can do it. And I stopped again. None of these, oh, it's too hard to do. Oh, no, I can't do that. You can do it. You can do it. You can not drink. You can not smoke. You can not put yourself into situations. All you have to do is do it. And you lead by example. I have realized with my granddaughter who lives with me, I haven't set down rules for her. I have not said you need to do this in a certain way. You need to dress this way at a certain time. She sees what I do. Even volunteering. I wanted her to put a space in her life for volunteering, for doing things for people. But you know, kids say, oh, I'm too busy. Oh, I have to do this. Oh, I have to do that. So I decided, okay, I will go volunteer. And when she sees that I'm doing that, when I can put aside time, she will do it. She did. Took her several months, 3-4 months. But when she saw that I was volunteering, she started volunteering too. And it's in her schedule. We can do it. We can do whatever we want to do. Talking about the old ways, all we have to do is talk about those old ways. All we have to do is do those old ways. Walk our talk. Walk our prayer. Just be strong. We can do that. Thank you, Kevin.
Thank you, Phyllis. Oh, go ahead.
There's something I wanted to say. One thing that I feel that as tribes or as nations that we need to develop our practices around people who are speaking out. You know, when, you know, we're talking about the red hand and being silenced, as well as now breaking the silence, we need to have those spaces that we're in, whether it's in such a space like this or anywhere else, that if people are opening up and beginning to share, when they share their stories about what has happened to them, we need to have that time for them, all, you know, to listen, but also to have that understanding so that in turn they're not being condemned. Because when that starts to happen, and that has happened to me, you know, that, you know, we're speaking out, I'm speaking out and telling the truth, but now I'm dealing with the fallout from speaking the truth from within, you know, my own familial circle, as well as, you know, to the people that know me. And suddenly they're wanting to say, well, why did you? Why, you know, that you didn't know, why didn't you know better? And in that way, it's like, well, there were things that were happening, circumstances that were beyond, you know, my understanding or control, that, hey, you know, I didn't know that was going to happen. It happened so fast, so swiftly, you know, that there was no chance for me to even protect myself or to call out for help, that kind of thing. So when people, women, men, whomever, children are speaking now and saying, you know, this did happen to me, and they're going about it in a way that they are now healing from it, we need to have a space, or we need to have that process in place for them so that their words are being honored and they're not going to self-destruct because they're receiving whatever, you know, they may be, you know, being harassed by, you know, within their own communities. And the example I thought of was that young singer that committed suicide in December after she started to open up and speak about what was happening to her within her own community. So things that do happen that are beyond our control, so to speak, we also need to be able to find that way to embrace those who are brave enough to share their experiences. For me, I feel like I'm at an age now, so if I do share something, I don't feel so anguished about it, you know, as I would have if I were much younger. Because I feel that, as what Phyllis had said, I've found my strength. And this is also what we need to help our people with, is in finding that strength in themselves to not be silent anymore, but also to say, you know, I'm going to stand by my word. And I don't know, you know, however that affects others, if that helps them to open up and to begin to speak their own truth, but also to help others to understand. My experience is different from someone else's experience to somebody else's experience. But nevertheless, we did experience that, whether it was violence, sexual abuse, any kind of lateral violence that we may have gone through, ostracism, you name it. All those forms of violence can affect us, but we need to find our safe circles to be able to heal. So for me, I guess that's like one of the next steps that we need to take, is how do we create such circles? And, you know, what ways, you know, where, no matter where we're at, where we're living, what ways can we develop now? Because, you know, we know that we need to have our traditions and our spirituality, but there's something also that we need to have that we might not have even thought of. So I guess that's where my mind's going as well in all of this, you know. And I do feel that those who are in power, I guess you'd say, whether that's like the police or, you know, our tribal leaders or the state leaders, whomever, it does, you know, whomever is holding some kind of authority position and are holding whatever the resources, the funding, they need to understand that, you know, in order to help us, they also have to listen to what we have to say. And if we're invisible, then yes, we do need that help from our non-native relatives to begin that process of saying, you know, we're going to do this, and how, you know, and come and ask, how do we do this? How do we help you? I guess for me, I feel like we need to be more, we need to come up with our plans, our strategies, and to continue this work. Because you know, I guess personally, I felt burned out this past year. And I was going to just put everything away and say, you know, I can't do this work anymore with MMIW. It's just too much. It's too heavy. But at the beginning of this year, after what happened with my niece, then it was like, okay, obviously my work isn't done. So I need to stand back up and be strong and continue. So those are my thoughts. I'm just sharing and putting out there. And, you know, I wanted to say that much and say thank you again. Thank you to Colette and thank you to you, Kevin. Thank you to Leo. Thank you to everyone who's here tonight. Weeblaha, Wopila.
Thank you, Renee.
That means go eat, everyone. That's what that means. Renee said we can go eat now. We're all hungry sitting here. I know we are. Don't lie.
Yeah, we have to feed the spirits.
That was good. Those were good words. I really, really appreciate what Miss Phyllis and what Renee just said. That really, I really like that. I call them they're like my Jedi. When I get all mixed up and then they just kind of verbally turn me around, kind of slap me around, like, get over it. Come on, you do it. And I think that's an important point. All of us, I think just being here, we're all kind of taking care of one another. You know, that's a good time. We're all staying on here, even though I was sneaking snacks and we're hanging in there with one another because it feels good to us. So I appreciate that. Thanks, Kevin.
Thank you. You know, we are moving on to a little past a couple hours here. Anybody who, you know, needs to leave or has something they need to do, certainly invite you to do that. There are a couple people who we haven't heard much from tonight, and I would certainly invite them to, you know, share any thoughts they may be having as we discuss these things tonight. Alexandria and Sarah, if you wouldn't mind just kind of sharing maybe your thoughts on what has been discussed tonight.
I'll say as an artist, especially in my gallery talks, I talk about my work not being about myself or my experience necessarily, but I try to create a space that creates a call to action. And I think that's where we are. Like, no matter what our field of expertise is, we can all do something every day. And it can be something as small as having a conversation just to keep things moving forward. So I think that's the most important thing for me personally.
Great, thank you.
I wanted to say that this whole issue scares me. I go to school in Omaha, you know, the top 20 cities where indigenous women go missing. Anytime I step out the door of my room or my dorm, my classes, anytime I step out, I'm scared that something might happen. But I know it's not just me, and I have to advocate for the members of my student, not my student council, but the members who are in my student organization. I have to stay strong for them. So if I can do anything, even if it's just hosting events on campus to get people aware of the situation that's going on, then I'll do it.
I appreciate that, Alexandria. And I'm sorry you feel that way. You know, I'm one of the reasons that I feel it's important for men to continue addressing these issues as well. As a lot of us are fathers. You know, I've got raising 3 young daughters here, 14 and younger, and it just terrifies me when I think about the kind of world that I'm sending them into. All of the statistics regarding Native women are just really unfortunate, deplorable, and anything I can do to, any of us can do, I guess, to try to raise awareness about these issues, to try to combat these issues in any way that we can, I think is important to do. And as a father, it's my responsibility to do that. So I'm sorry you feel that way, and I sure hope that things improve there. So.
Hey, Kevin. So this is Misty again, and I have just a few thoughts, and I have one just on what you all are talking about, and I think it's important for all of us, you know, to remember that it has taken us generations and generations and generations to get to where we are today as a people, including all of the historical that has happened to us, and it's going to take a long time to get to the point where we're healthier. And I think that we all play an important role in that. And I think that's important what you were saying about raising your daughters. And as parents, we have that important role of protecting our daughters, and I think at the same time empowering them and teaching them and loving them, teaching them culture and language traditions, all of that for our girls. And then at the same time, when we have sons, to teach them that their role is to protect women, protect their younger sisters, their cousins, to watch out for them, and not just those relatives that are close to them, but others at the same time. And I think we can all do a little bit better than that. And I'm speaking, personally. I have a daughter that's 16 years old, and my husband is a police officer, and we're constantly talking to her about being vigilant about who's around you, who's in your, the people that are around her. She's driving now. So watching out where she's at. we have a tracker on her phone, so we can track where she's at. We don't have those same kinds of things for our son, but I kind of wish we could, but he's a little bit older and not allowing us to have a tracker on his phone. But then, for him, we've tried to teach him about and healthy relationships and showing them, and I could tell my personal story of my life and how it has transformed. And I'm really, really thankful that my husband is there to show them what a dad is supposed to be and how they're supposed to be, because they haven't always had that positive role model. So, kind of going back to what we were talking about before about culture and, what are we going to do about it? We all have that responsibility, and it starts within ourselves. I think Renee was kind of talking about that too, about within ourselves and then within our own families, and, so that we can be stronger and be better advocates for our tribes and our communities. And I also just I did put a comment in the chat about children in foster care, and that a lot of our youth in foster care become victims of human trafficking, sex trafficking, those kinds of things that lead to missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls. And so we have that's a huge population that often goes underserved as well, and providing them the ability to heal and the services that they need as well. And we have a bill that's gone forward within Nebraska to the Bridge to Independence bill, to bridge the age gap of tribal youth to be eligible for Bridge to Independence. And that's one of the reasons why, we're doing that, is because that's an important program that can provide services to our youth that are aging out of foster care. And I really do think they should be pushing that issue, not just for our Native youth, but for all youth. And that would be an avenue to address that issue. Thank you.
Thank you for doing that. No, that's a great idea. Really working with those children who are aging out of the system. My wife and I were foster parents for several years, and 3 of the children we have now are adopted. And Native children, as are vastly overrepresented within our child welfare systems across the country. Within the Rosebud Sioux tribe alone, there are over 300 children needing placement, and there's just nowhere near enough Native American foster parents, adoptive parents to pick up, that need there and carry it. And so that's one of the other things I would encourage, I guess, as we're talking tonight, is if you are a Native person, an adult, consider fostering a Native child, consider adopting a Native child. My wife and I had 2 very healthy, a boy and a girl, and we decided we were done at that point, and any other children we would have would be adopted. And we've had 3 of them, and can't tell you how much they've enriched our lives. I mean, they're not, I discuss them here as being adopted, but they don't feel like that to me in any way whatsoever. But that's certainly, I think, one thing that people can do as well is consider trying to pick up that need. All right. Well, I think Colette, I was going to have you, if you would mind, talk about this call to action box. Are you ready to do that?
Yeah, sure. My edited, Kevin edited it for me. Appreciate that. That was great. And real quick, I wanted to, I thank you, Misty and Renee and Phyllis again. That was great. I was hoping someone would bring up there is a direct link between the kids in foster care or runaways. It's directly tied to trafficking and other sexual misconducts, exploitations going on. So that's a wonderful point. Okay, I noticed while we were sitting on here, Christine Novus, who you probably know from Seeding Sovereignty, that's sort of her, she has a project shift going on right now with politics. She posted a letter to Trump on what Kevin just talked about in terms of him claiming he was responsible for MMIW legislation and all that. And then my dear friend and tribal member, Shishayan Anita, soon to be Dr. Anita, she posted new resources as well for us to look at. But being me, I'm a nerd first, is what I tell everybody. I developed a call to action for us tonight, and I think that most of you have talked about it. And the first one was we have to thank everybody for being here. This was a difficult conversation for us to engage in, and just the fact that everyone who shared tonight, your bravery and your courage is absolutely commendable. And secondly, I think it's important that we keep hosting these conversations. Like, please don't let this be the only one. I'm a teacher. And most of you know that about me. I will show someone how to do it, but I don't need to be there all the time. Go off and flourish, go fly. I'll find something else to go do anyway. So who can host the next community conversation for this? I think that would be a good call to action. Third, I know Kevin's aunt was on here, and I know Listina works in this area, Grace, of course, therapist. But where are the shelters in your community? I'm sure Mona talked about some of those. Identify those. We never know when a cousin, a niece, I feel good when my kids come to me and ask me, just what's a condom, Mom? Fine, I'll answer it. I'm not like my parents, that old-fashioned approach. I have to answer these questions now. Fourth, are we showing compassion to one another? I think Renee and a couple of others, you alluded to that. We're sharing our stories about our relatives or our own things. I'm very public about my story, what I've gone through. That we're not going and repeating that story when we don't have permission to do so, or we're using that against somebody. 5, Kevin talked about this. We have to continue to contact our tribal, local, city, and now our state governments. VAWA is still not, it is not all the way through. We have to support Deb Holland on her march going all the way through on this. And as we know, our Congress has to agree to that. And then the bill that, thank you for bringing that up again, my dear friend and sister Misty, with supporting our children who are aging out of the system. 7, some of you are doing this, but are we donating to organizations? I used to be on a domestic violence board. It's hard work. We hear those stories. And are they getting the toilet paper? I had to throw that in. I just had to throw shade about that going on right now in society. But are they getting the basic needs and resources that they have? Wherever, here, reservations, I don't care. Oklahoma, are we sending stuff? And then finally, if someone does share their stories with us, are we thanking them that they trusted us enough to hear that, to help them along the way? Or are we thanking the senators? I sent a thank you to Senator Brewer when he passed LB 154. Are we doing basic things like that? So there it is. And then I figured with all this brilliant brain power, this would be like 2 encyclopedias right here. Just a group alone. So much knowledge and wisdom here. I figured my dear colleagues would have their own calls to action. Thanks, Kevin.
Thank you. I did want to offer some time for any closing thoughts that people may have. If anybody just wants to take it up from there. So
I guess the call to action that I would have is to consider like how we all heard about how we all heard about this or how our community members heard about this. It was through the marches and the memes and the red dresses and the handprints. I mean, it was the activism that brought a lot of people together, and we need to keep pushing that. We need to keep participating. We need to keep hosting that, showing up as something we're going to have to keep doing, because that's what brings the issue to the front, is the activism. And I think we all need to keep doing what we're doing, keep making our voices heard, keep speaking for those that can't speak for themselves. And on that note, I would like to mention the name Mona Armendariz, who's a Ho-Chunk woman who was brutally murdered in Mankato, Minnesota. She's the daughter of my mentor, Phyllis Armendariz, who was a Ho-Chunk teacher.
I see that Adrian has some thoughts. Adrian, do you want to share?
Yes, I just had a couple of announcements for Zachary Bear Hills for his case. If you guys are interested in following it, you can go to Justice for Zachary Bear Hills on Facebook. We have a page and there's a lot of information on there. Also, if anybody is listening out there in Oklahoma, we're going to have a memorial vigil for him on June 6th, 2020, coming up here in about a month, at Zach's maternal grandmother's house near Carnegie, Oklahoma. And also, I kind of wanted to piggyback off of the thoughts about the young men and the boys who, getting involved in this movement. I went to an event recently here in Albuquerque. That's where I live. And Albuquerque has, I think, one of the highest rates of MMIW as a city. And in this room packed full of, for this discussion, I counted maybe less than 5% of the room were men. It was just a fraction. And then I went to another event and it was very similar. And I was thinking, why is it that, it's a lot of us women, talking about it, and there's few men talking about it. And I think that's something we need to, maybe start in our own homes. I have 4 sons, and they're still small. They're really small, but I feel like this is every bit their issue. As boys who are going to grow up into men, I feel it's my sacred. Oh, I'm muted.
Oh, I can hear you.
Okay, sorry, I don't know what happened, but yeah, I just wanted to say those things, and also to be careful for the crabs in the bucket effect that I feel like often happens in Indian country, where people are trying to accomplish things, but it tends to be our own community, our own people that will stab us in the back. So we have to figure out a solution to uniting and coming together a little better, because oftentimes that's hard to do, even maybe in our own homes. So these are just thoughts of mine, and I thank you again. Aho.
Aho. Adrian, Misty posted a question. Are you guys going to go live for Zachary's memorial vigil?
Yeah, more than likely we will. It is going to be open to the public, and we're going to, definitely go live and share the vigil, so people who can't make it can be there in virtually and in spirit. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. I wanted to feel free to come back to the call to action. This is great. It was great, Michelle. I didn't know if this would come up, but we brought up Dr. Frank Lemire. Amazing, just amazing, just not replaceable at all. And it made me think about White Clay. Maybe we should mention Sherry Wounded Foot. That was unfortunately, that was a national stage MMIW case. And I think Kevin covered that, if I recall correctly. So I wanted to say her name and remember that family as well.
Yeah, that was very tragic, obviously. I actually did cover that right for the Lincoln Journal-Star right before I left the Journal-Star for Indians.com back in August of 2016 was when her body was found. Well, actually, she was still alive at the time. And she did live for about 12 days, maybe about 2 weeks or so, until she did pass away. But, nobody was ever charged. There were no, it's so unfortunate. I mean, this has happened so often in that area in White Clay and Rapid City. So many women and even men have been murdered. And so often there's just no result. There's no accountability. There's no really even serious investigations. One of the things that really started the whole effort to shut down White Clay was the death of Ronald Hardhart and Wallace Black Elk, two men who their bodies were found in kind of a culvert in between White Clay and Pine Ridge. And to this day, this was back in 1999 that they were found. Nobody's ever been found guilty, and there have been no suspects even named. And I couldn't even begin to tell you why that is. I mean, I don't know if it's lack of really serious investigation or, people not wanting to say anything or coming forward. There's probably some combination of these things, but yeah, there's just there's so few answers to these deaths that are happening in those places. So. Anybody else? Any closing thoughts?
I just want to thank you all for putting this together and gathering us and for everybody's good thoughts and good words. I really appreciate it, and thank you for allowing us to be a part of it.
I'd like to say thank you all as well. With that, I also would like to say good night to all the people who are watching, and thank you for being involved. And please help us to raise awareness about what's happening to our people. And thank you, and good night, everyone.
I do have to ask you a question, though, Leo, before you log off there. On behalf of everybody who's been watching this program tonight, are you wearing a cape?
No. So what happened was Phyllis said that I was supposed to be wearing some red today. And because I wasn't prepared to wear red today, I found this nice red blanket. And so I wrapped it around me to represent our missing and murdered Indigenous women. And because of Jamie Black's relative who said that spirits see the color red, I'm also symbolically calling back the spirits of those who have been kidnapped, raped, and murdered in our community as well. So I'm wearing this today as a reminder because of my Hunka'ina, Phyllis Stone, at the beginning of this podcast.
Thank you.
So thank you, Phyllis, and thank you everyone for watching, and good night.
Anybody else?
Thank you.
No,
Thank
more.
you for having us.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you all for joining me tonight. I couldn't have assembled a better slate of guests tonight to talk about these issues. A good mix of people on the front lines, people who've done a lot of research in this area, people who've lost loved ones to this epidemic that's ravaging our communities. So I want to thank you all for sharing your stories and sharing your thoughts and your knowledge on this topic tonight. And I don't want this to be the only time we do this, or I don't want to only do this on this date either, just on May 5th. I think it's something that we have to bring up constantly, any opportunity we get. And if I can facilitate that in any way, please feel free to call on me to do so. I'm always happy to do that. So with that, I guess we'll close tonight, and I want to thank all of our viewers tonight for sticking with us. Yeah, certainly look forward to other conversations like this in the future. Aho, wopi latanka, adakiapi.
Okay, good
night. Naish, thank you, everyone. Go eat, go bathroom, take care of yourself. Appreciate all of you.